Welcome, good thinkers. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. I am really, really glad you're here. I'm excited about our conversation today. Let me know who you are and where you're from. Also, a bonus. If you want, let us know what you're working on. Like, I'm working on this, or what you're thinking about. You can add something. I'd love to bring it in and put other good thinkers on the job of helping you think through things. So that would be kind of fun. Add that to the comments. We've got a lot of good rubber chickens to give out today for everyone's ideas and participation. And so I'm excited to see what you guys have to say, your contributions. All right. I've been thinking a lot about the nature of reality. And I mean, the nature of reality, but more specifically, what is real? And, we enter this world of deep fakes, things that look totally real to us. And then we're told exactly what to think about these things that look totally real to us. And then there's like the deeper questions. Are we living in a simulation? So that's where I try to keep in mind one of my favorite allegories in philosophy, probably one of the most famous allegories in philosophy, which is Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And it was in Plato's, I think the 7th chapter of Plato's The Republic. And this is where Plato imagined a society, things like truth and justice and beauty. Actually, Plato thought that philosophy was kind of like therapy, I don't agree. I agree. I do agree. Do you think, for those of you philosophy nerds, do you think it's possible that philosophy could be kind of like therapy? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you think philosophy can be kind of like therapy? Well, as we know, that an allegory is a kind of story that's meant to stand in for something real. Sometimes we read allegory into things that really aren't there. So like Tolkien, for example, said, hey, no, Lord of the Rings is not an allegory, even though a lot of people read in a lot of allegory. He goes, that's not what I intended. But like Lewis Carroll's Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, clearly allegorical. Lewis Carroll probably didn't defy that assumption. Do you know Plato's Allegory of the Cave? Let me know. Let me know. Where are the good thinkers? Where are you from? Who are you? Because this is where we show up most Mondays on Good Thinking Live, right here on LinkedIn Live, and also streaming live to YouTube at Becky Saltzman. If you want to subscribe, you hit that bell a couple of times, you'll get notifications, and you can join the live show. But also you can, if you watch it later, participate, put your comments in if you're watching this not live, because even though sometimes we respond to the comments, but other times we don't, but we always see all the comments, whether you watch live or after the live stream. Stephen says, let's see, we've got greetings from the home of the Voodoo Donut Challenge. Voodoo Donut Challenge. We actually have a challenge winner here in the house, not Stephen. Anyway, Voodoo Donuts. Have you ever had a Voodoo Donut? Have you ever seen a line in Portland for Voodoo Donuts? Crazy, crazy. All right, so ready for the allegory of the cave. Let me set the scene. First, we have a cave. All right, we have this cave. And it's very, very, very dark. There's a wall, and then there's a wall, dark wall. Then there's maybe a stairs leading up to the opening of the cave. And between the wall and the opening of the cave is a fire. And in front of the fire is maybe like a half wall. All right, so you've got this wall, fire, half wall, fire, opening of the cave, something like that. And prisoners, a group of prisoners, a handful of prisoners, are facing the wall of the cave. It's totally dark. And they have been there forever. So that's their entire reality. Their necks and ankles are chained, and they can't turn to see anything other than the wall of the cave. Now, here's the thing. In front of that half wall are people holding up, imagine I'm going to call them puppets. things made of wood or other materials, and they're hiding behind the wall, and they're holding up the puppets, which are casting shadows on the wall of the cave. So these prisoners, their entire reality is just seeing the shadows on the wall of the cave. That's it. So how many of you have ever done these, those little things where you take your hands like this and you, and you use that to cast a shadow on the wall? That's kind of their entire reality. And you can imagine they're having contests, like who can name the dog the fastest, or who can name the objects the fastest. And there are, maybe they give rewards or, rewards for these kinds of things. But this is their entire reality. All right. So this was described by Plato as the prisoners are potentially like us. And, our entire reality maybe is maybe this, where this is all we see. So this is our reality, and this is everything that's important to us. All right. And these prisoners believe that if you pay a lot of attention to these things, these real things, you'll understand and succeed in life. All right. So think about that. Think about a topic where you can name a lot of things. You could say, hey, I know that shadow is a dog, and that one's a bird, and that one's a flower. You can name a lot of things, and that is your proof of knowledge, that you can name a lot of things. And we think that we can know because we can name. I can think of a lot of things where, like with a computer, I can name a lot of things, but I don't really know, like on a mathematical level, how things happen to get from what I'm saying now into your face on the, into your eyes on the computer. There's a lot of things that maybe a lot of you know more than I do, I'm sure. But there are a lot of things where we can name a lot of things, and we think that that is a stand-in for what we know. All right. So here's what happens next. One prisoner is freed. One prisoner is freed. He doesn't escape, but he's freed, and he's made to turn around, and he's brought out of the cave for the first time. And you can imagine, how many of you have ever been to a theater, like a matinee during the day, and you're in this theater, and you're in this theater, and you walk out into the outside, and it's still light outside, and you're like, your brain has to adjust because you thought, wait, I thought it was nighttime, but then you remember. So it's that confusion. So the prisoner, that's what the prisoner is experiencing. How many of you can kind of get that feeling in your head? Just let me know. All right. So, Alan says Voodoo is for tourists. Blue Star Donuts is for donut connoisseurs. Voodoo isn't bad though. Okay. So I have to agree. If you are a donut connoisseur, there is no question. But Blue Star, a lot of the Blue Star stores closed during COVID. That's a sad, sad thing. What is your favorite Blue Star? Mine is the blueberry lemon. I don't really even like Voodoo donuts, but they're very colorful. Anyway, so those are the donuts. So what is the nature of reality between Blue Star and Voodoo? What are the better donuts? Maybe the prisoners in the cave had only ever experienced Voodoo, and they had never experienced Blue Star. All right. Okay. So, and Stephen says he totally agrees with Alan. So let's put this up. We totally agree. We've got this Voodoo donut, Blue Star. This is kind of how we're going to measure the nature of reality. All right. So the prisoner goes up, the free prisoner goes up, and then the eyes, the prisoner's eyes start adjusting, and they start to see that the bird that they thought, okay, this is what we call the bird, actually has song and depth and color and smell. And there's like an energy when the bird flies. I mean, all of this reality hits the prisoner smack in all of the senses. And the prisoner can't believe that the shadows aren't real and that the objects are real. And he begins to look at reflections in the water, and he looks up at the stars. And eventually, this is kind of the metaphor, the allegory, he goes, and he looks at the sun, just what your parents told you never to do. Don't look directly at the sun. Looks at the sun. And that is, a sign or an allegory for knowledge, pursuit of knowledge, enlightenment, etc., etc. All right. Now, he grasps the divine nature of the universe and he says, I've got to go back and tell the others. All right, here's the question. Is it a good idea for the freed prisoner to go back to the cave and tell the others? Yes or no? Let us know in the chat. Where are the good thinkers? Let us know in the chat. All right. Is it a good idea? Well, whether it's a good idea or not, the freed prisoner goes back to tell the others what was discovered. And in doing so, you know, when you go back into the dark and all of a sudden you've been in the dark and your eyes have adjusted, you remember being able to see in the dark, but now you go back in the dark and you can't see anything. So the freed prisoner kind of stumbles around. He can't see the shadows, you know, he's not adjusted and gets confused. And the other prisoners think that the journey has made him stupid and blind. And so guess what they do? Do they say, oh, thank you for telling us that we've been wrong, that we don't understand. Thank you for telling us that we're stupid. No, they don't. They say, you're stupid. You got crazy because you went out there and what you're saying has made you crazy. And this is clearly a reference to Socrates, who was Plato's mentor, who a couple of decades before this story was written, had been sentenced to death and given a delicious hemlock cocktail by the government of Athens for disrupting the social order. All right, so here is the point that Plato is making, but then I have some other questions for you. He uses this story, Plato uses this story to point out that most people are not only comfortable in their ignorance, but they're hostile to those who point it out by way of showing what they might be missing. And it's also a warning to truth tellers who can expect resistance when they take knowledge back to the people who were sheltered from it before. All right, now it's super easy to see others as the prisoners and us, ourselves, as the freed prisoner. All right, so how do you know if you're one of the prisoners or the freed prisoner? Okay, if you're here, let me know. Do you think that you are more one of the prisoners, trapped prisoner, or free prisoner? Trapped or freed? If you're watching later, tell us. Just put trapped or freed. I'll be very curious to hear, because I'm going to throw out another question. Who are the puppeteers? Who are the puppeteers in this story? Who are the puppeteers? Well, you can think of puppeteers. Puppeteers show up on our wall of the cave. Puppeteers. People telling us what to believe, telling us what to read, notifying us to tell us what to pay attention to. Those are the puppeteers. So my question is, now you've got three. Are you a prisoner, a freed prisoner, or a puppeteer? Which one? Prisoner, freed prisoner, or puppeteer? So Dr. Ahmed says, yes, tell me I'm stupid. Oh, well, what did Socrates say? Something like, I know that I do not know. And that's his proof for when he was arguing against the Oracle of Delphi. But I digress. Dr. Muhammad, bonus points, chickens, bonus points, chickens for being like Socrates. All right. Now, when you think about this and like it's applicable, if it's applicable to business, there's all these stories that in hindsight prove who was the freed prisoner and who were the prisoners. Like this, one of the common told stories is when the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, approached the Blockbuster CEO in 2000 and offered to sell Netflix for $50 million. And at that point, you know, Netflix was ambitious. It was still mailing DVDs, but it had these visions. And the CEO of Blockbuster dismissed the startup as a very niche business. So here's a question. Who's Blockbuster today? Who's Blockbuster today? All right, let's get some comments. We have got, let's see. Steven says, I cycle through all three in different contexts. Absolutely. I think that's great. Rubber chickens, even though he doesn't care about rubber chickens. I'm giving you one rubber chicken. You get more if you cared. Let's see, Matthew, what does Matthew say? Matthew says, didn't they chain the escaped prisoner back up again and eventually fell back into his stupor? Very much like the social media, as you pointed out. Yes, let's see. Some days I feel like the wall. Okay, that's good. That's good. Just the wall. I just feel like the wall. Things are just projected on me. That's a new take. That's actually a new take. That deserves a rubber chicken too. That's a new take. Because I didn't think about that. Sometimes you're the chained prisoner. Sometimes you're the free prisoner. Sometimes you're the puppeteer. But sometimes you're the wall. It's awesome. All right. Here's my question. How do you know that the freed prisoner wasn't experiencing a simulation? How do you know that what you think you know is the truth? Now, there is one distinction that I would make in this freed prisoner scenario. And maybe it was a convenience of just what Plato knew at the time, but let's borrow it for maybe more than he intended, Plato intended, which is imagine that the freed prisoner went out of the cave, and it was a library instead of the world. It was a library. And in the library were books that described all kinds of things, but they were written by other people. And some of those books told you what to think. Some of those books told you what is real, but you read all these books, and for sure you would have much more knowledge than the prisoners, because all they have is that kind of one-dimensional on the wall, these gray images. But imagine it was a library. You think, wow. Or imagine it was access to your phone. It was access to your phone. And you could look and see all there is to see. Now, would you be closer to the divine nature of reality? Or would it be another layer of puppeteers? Another layer of puppeteers. So is there a difference between going out into nature and going into a library and reading about nature? And how much time do you spend contemplating this or experiencing this? Now, Socrates was the one that said, an unexamined life is not worth living. And that can mean a lot of different things. And some people don't even examine their life. They just buy into the shadows. And when they have these moments of revelation, they just assume, oh, that might be the truth. Or someone told me that this is the truth. Or someone wrote about this being the truth. Now, you don't want to go around going, nothing is reality. I don't believe it. That's how conspiracy theorists begin to think that their version of the truth is closer to reality simply because it's different from the masses. And now you're in possession of this little nugget of knowledge. That feeling of superiority between what you know and what others know is a sign that you might not know. What about that? How much time do you spend coming out of the cave into a library, or out of the cave and into your phone, or out of the cave and into a chunk of knowledge that has been presented by others for you, versus original content, like going out in nature and discovering things for yourself? I'm going to be honest, probably for me, 90% of the time, I'm going into the library, going onto my phone, 90% of the time. 10% of the time, I slap myself silly and get outside and try, without listening to a podcast, without having those puppeteers present information, I try to have just a little bit of firsthand original source material. How much time? Anyone? All right. And how much of what you know is really being able to name? Now, also beware of putting people on pedestals for guessing right. Because back to the Netflix blockbuster thing, maybe it was just a lucky guess that if the CEO of Blockbuster had said, hey, yeah, let's do this for $50 million. Maybe it was a lucky guess. And then we put them on a pedestal, or maybe there was just a big influx of money, or the board of directors at Blockbuster said, no, we need an acquisition. And at that time, Reed Hastings came, and then the CEO of Blockbuster is the oracle who knew everything, but maybe it was a lucky guess. Who might be the cave dwellers today? Anyone? What do you think? Where are all the good thinkers on this philosophical adventure? Another point that Plato makes again and again is when we name an object we can see, we are actually naming something we cannot see. We ascribe names only to things that we can grasp with our minds, and in the process, we name one form of the object. We don't really know. All right, so Matthew says, let's see, at its best, a university's purpose is to teach you how to think in various contexts. Majors, also known as escaping. At worst, it teaches you what to think, AKA the prisoners. Some of it is up to us in how we treat our education. Yes. And particularly, if we see some escaped prisoners as being in possession of the truth, and other escaped prisoners in being in possession of bad stuff, misleading stuff. Now, obviously, not all ideas are of equal value. Not all ideas are equally warranted. That's the other thing. So how do you know? All right. Question. Who's happier? The escaped prisoner who has to think things through, or the trapped prisoners who are spoon-fed reality? Great question. More rubber chickens. More rubber chickens. It depends on, and who is happier? That's a big question, because how much of what we know creates the angst that we wouldn't have if we didn't know? Now, according to Socrates and his pupil Plato and Aristotle, this unexamined life is just really, it's not worth living. So in their estimation, it would be better to not be the prisoner. Like that prisoner, the prisoners are not living a fulfilled, flourishing life. Now, happiness is a weird thing. Happiness is a weird thing. It's maybe different than flourishing. All right. Let's say AE. Yes, it's good to share with people what you've discovered. Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up. Excellent. Because the question is, how do you share with people that you perceive don't know when they don't want to hear? I mean, have you ever led someone where they don't want to go? Have you ever led someone where they don't want to go? How do you lead people who are not interested in hearing what it is you have to say? Well, here's what I would argue. If you're telling them, read what I wrote, if you're telling them, listen to what I say, if you're telling them what to do, chances are maybe they'll read the book and be like, this is great. This is my new wall of thinking. And then you tell them, yes, you have to believe this wall because that wall isn't a reality. I don't know that is moving toward what Socrates and Plato would ascribe in terms of an examined life. But if you help them out of the cave, how is that different? And then Matthew asks a good question. Is one person's escape another person's trap? Yeah, it depends, because if you're escaping onto the screen, or if you're escaping into the library, then you may be escaping into a different kind of simulation, maybe a more multi-layered simulation, maybe a tastier simulation because you have more ingredients. But, maybe our brain's purpose is not to help us process everything, but to actually act as something that helps us block most things. And so that becomes this whole examine life question. All right. And he says, we deny what we do not know. We deny what we do not know. That goes back to absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Not alone anyway. All right. So how much of what you know is because you were told this is what is what. I mean, that could be about all kinds of things. You should say this, you should believe that, you should feel this way, you can't say this, you can't ask that. But who are those puppeteers telling you? Now, obviously, we live in society. There are societal conventions that are here for a purpose. But rebellious thinking is sometimes seen as crazy conspiratorial thinking, sometimes seen as dictatorial thinking, sometimes seen as uncomfortable thinking. And maybe the best kind of rebellious thinking is where it inspires and sparks curiosity. And, one of the biggest curiosity killers could be this comfort with being a prisoner and not wanting to be freed from the shadows and the games, and particularly the prisoners who have the reward for being the number one prisoner to name all of the objects on the cave wall. And you've got that reward. Well, the last thing you want to do is be freed and go up where you don't have any rewards. No one cares that you are the winner of the wall contest. So think about this 2,500 years ago. I mean, this is these guys were like the ones. Plato wrote The Matrix 2,500 years ago. So how do you deal with a rebellious thinker? Well, first of all, you have to discover their motivation. Maybe they're a prisoner who left the cave and they're trying to enlighten you. Maybe they are secretly one of the puppeteers. But it's very difficult to discover their motivation when you go with preconceived notions about whether they are the puppeteer or the freed prisoner. And then you can help them understand the impact of their behavior. Like maybe you're the oracle and you're looking at the scenario and you're saying, okay, how can we make this all work? Well, you help them understand that when you go out and you see reality and you try to bring it back in, this is what you can expect. And these are some ways that you can combat that. And then refocus their energy, because maybe they don't need to be rebellious about every single thing. I mean, maybe the guy who escaped the cave doesn't need to tell them, all these prisoners, everything. And also, this is kind of the empathy point that you have to consider, which is when that when that released, big distinction, released prisoner came back to the cave, maybe there should have been a little period of acclimation before jumping into letting the prisoners see that they were stumbling around and couldn't identify, to try to get back a little bit back to when they were once a prisoner too. So there's deep, deep stuff in this allegory. Who knows how much Plato knew, but my guess is a lot, because he was really smart. All right, and then invite rebels to poke on assumptions, including your own, because maybe you are the prisoner looking at shadows. So invite rebels to poke on your assumptions. And when you're told you're wrong, make sure that your first response is curiosity instead of resistance. All right, so that's a little bit of I love this allegory of the cave. And sometimes I think to myself, okay, today, what am I? I don't think I've ever really thought of being the wall. All right, so Matthew says, can we ever truly escape? We only ever see a subjective version of objective reality filtered through our senses and pre-processed before it even gets to our brain. Yes, brilliant. Can we ever truly escape? The question is, are we living in a matrix? Which, if you look at some of Nick Bostrom's stuff, you could say, there's some good statistical probabilities there or possibilities there. But the important thing is not necessarily to know and define exactly where you are, who you are, but just to be aware of the different roles. That alone is fun to think about. And Hussein says, can I say Elon Musk has the character of a rebellious thinker? Maybe Elon Musk does, in terms of if you measure rebellion by playing the game of business the best, and maybe there is some rebellious thinking. I do think the term thought leader is tossed about a little bit too promiscuously. Like, I don't think that being a thought leader is someone who talks about, climate change necessarily. I mean, that's a good thing to talk about, but does that make you a thought leader? So those are some questions, but we'll see. Maybe Elon Musk is a rebellious thinker. In some ways, maybe he is. Really enjoying this. Reminds me of my old Socrates Cafe group back in college. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, we're going to wrap it up, but we're not obviously always going to be deep in philosophy, but with good thinking, there is this intersection of curiosity and critical thinking where it kind of helps to go back to what people who really spent their lives thinking about and talking about and writing about, although not Socrates because he didn't write things down, discussed. And I think it's fun. So thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Be sure to tune in if other good thinking conversations, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And I love all your comments. And thanks for helping me see, when I'm the prisoner looking at the screen. And if we all start in the cave, we don't have to stay there. The road out, maybe the road out is called philosophy, the study of the fundamental nature, knowledge, reality, and existence. And at the core of everything, when we disagree about all the kinds of things, maybe if we dig deep enough, deep enough, even in our deepest disagreements, the fundamental nature of reality or the fundamental nature of existence is where we might be able to find common ground. So thank you. Enjoy your week.